morning and a really warm welcome to our very first Gray Dawes Events seminar on how to create a seamless event. My name is Katie Whitby. I'm Head of Events for Gray Dawes, and this is Dave Bishop, who is one of our board members and our Chief Operating Officer. We're absolutely delighted that so many of you registered today, and I'm hoping this webinar will give you some ideas and recommendations to guide you in ensuring you create your own seamless events. So just to let you know, as we've just seen, the webinar will be recorded and sent out to all of you that have attended, and please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll answer them at the end or throughout as we go along. Firstly, I think it's really important that we realise no matter what size your event is, the principles are ultimately the same, just on a broader scale. It can be so daunting when you're asked to coordinate an event and to make sure that everything goes well. You really feel a huge pressure, and I do know that really, really well.
The purpose of today is to kind of give you some recommendations and top tips to kind of alleviate some of those concerns and really help you to create some memorable events. So I'm going to be question master today. We're going to kind of use kind of Katie's years and years of expertise in events. So Katie, first thing for me, what's the first thing people should consider when planning an event?
Okay, thanks, Dave. Well, for me, there's two things, I guess, but it's sort of combined in the same meaning. It's all very much around inclusivity, and one size does not fit all. So when we're organising an event, it's so important that we understand what we want to achieve at the event. You really need the key stakeholders to consider their objectives and purpose. As you know, their objectives, as soon as you know everyone's objectives, you can plan to innovate, inspire, and just be inclusive to everybody.
So what types of questions would you ask your stakeholders?
Oh my goodness, there is so many questions, but I'm going to give you just a little bit of a flavour of the types of questions that you ask. I think so often we sort of go along the lines of saying, what date do you want? How many people is it for? If we need to think about different ideas. So for example, who's attending and why are they attending? What level of personnel do you want there? And how many people from each department do you anticipate attending? Budget is really critical. Understand if there's flexibility, and if so, what variation does that mean? So many times we're given a set budget, then to find out there's another 5k available, another 10k available, and actually that can really enhance the experience. We need them to think about if they want the event to be fun, engaging, and immersive, and if so, how are we going to ignite them and engage them? Do we want to ignite debate? It's so powerful in getting some really great speakers and creating some great content, that invokes conversation and debate. They need to think about who they want to get involved. Location is key. Is the venue accessible? How will the colleagues or customers get to the venue? Does the venue reflect your values and ethos? So if you're like a young and technology-focused company, does the venue reflect that? And I suppose the other there's lots of questions, and we are going to provide some content afterwards. But the other thing I just wanted to mention was, does it involve any activities? Are you thinking of doing team building and those types of activities? And if you are, really consider, will they suit everybody? Can everyone do the activity physically, mentally? Is it worth considering a cultural activity? And what could you offer as an alternative? But obviously, does the venue have space to hold space for the activity? But there is so many questions, and as I say, we've got some support material after the seminar that we'll send out to you.
There's a lot to think about there, but kind of in your kind of opinion, what's the most critical part of any event?
That's without a doubt is prepare for every eventuality. For me, the preparation and run up to the event is the most critical part of any event, and making sure you have thought of everything. It can be so daunting, and no doubt you'll forget something, but my job is to try and make sure you don't, obviously. And the key is planning as early as possible. Booking a venue and planning well in advance means you're more likely to get better pricing, better availability, and great value for money. But I think what tends to happen is the big items are generally always covered. So you've covered the venue, you've covered, the seating plan and that type of thing. And I think it's the smaller details that make the difference, and those additional things that can make you guys as event planners look good. So, for example, I think this is quite a funny one, but suggest to everyone to carry additional battery chargers. And the reason I say that is because I've been in that experience where I've got on a train, I've downloaded my ticket to my phone, and then my battery's died. And there's a huge issue there because you can't access your ticket. So we've all been there, but I think it's really important, you start to suggest that to you guys that are attending. Something else as well is advise on parking situation. In most cases, venues have car parking on site, but if they have to pay somewhere else, to go somewhere else, they might need cash. I know it sounds old-fashioned, but sometimes you might need cash, or even download the parking app in advance, making it quick and easy, literally to pay and go. Probably one other little thing to consider is if speakers are doing presentations, get them to send them over in advance and have it on a memory stick.
And that's a great point. I mean, that's a great point because, we all know you can't always rely on Wi-Fi, can you, at some venues?
Absolutely not. And I think it's key to have backup plans. And, you do not want to be that person where you've got it on OneDrive and you get there and you can't download it. So that's key.
So just me ask you kind of a tiny question on kind of something you mentioned earlier, which is around planning early. And obviously it depends on the size of the event. But if you're looking for something, from an event for maybe 100 plus attendees, what sort of lead time should you be thinking about?
Well, it's at the moment, there's a real race for space. So I would suggest for 100 people, you're looking at least 6 months out. To be honest, June and November are the key corporate months if you're looking at a corporate event. So if you're looking at November, you need to be looking certainly now, and June for next year, I'd be looking at now. But if it's kind of not June or November, then give it at least 3 to 4 months.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. No, thanks for that, Katie. So obviously there are things that you can't prepare for. There's the unexpected. I mean, do you have any examples of what you would do about that when you're kind of confronted with, wow, we never even thought about that?
Yeah, and there are things you can't prepare for. So there are things like sickness, so people being sick. COVID is a prime example. I was out for a week with it recently. Or fire alarms going off is the other one. Unpredictable issues we can't foresee, but if we've got a backup plan in place. So, for example, last week I was at a 3-day event in London, which was an event I hadn't organised, and I was looking forward to hearing one of the speakers, and that speaker didn't actually show up, and I was looking around the room thinking, that speaker isn't here. I know who that speaker is, and I can't see them. But actually, for whatever reason, they couldn't attend, but they'd already got a second speaker ready to take the stand, had prepped them in the morning. So advice there is always have a backup speaker. And at the same event, we'd got a dinner at a very famous museum. And as soon as we sat down to eat the main course, fire alarm went off. We were all really quickly evacuated, and the team were really good. They'd got umbrellas at the ready. While some of the fire brigade were doing a recce of the site, some of the ladies who'd had a few G&Ts were in the front of the fire engine having a good time, driving and messing about. So it was creating memories, I guess, is what I'm saying there. And then we got back in really quickly within about 20 minutes. Staff continued to serve dessert, and then they managed to cook up a load of snacks for us after because the main course had gone cold. So they'd got those plans in place, which made it, it was slick. It was good.
Brilliant. Thanks, Katie. Just a kind of a note to the audience here, feel free to share any examples or stories you have, and you can add them into the chat box. And equally, if you've got any questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them here today. So obviously, a key thing is around if people are doing events, particularly in the summer months where it's outside. What about the weather? Can you give us an example of what people can think about there, because we know how unpredictable the weather can be?
Yeah, absolutely. And weather is one of those things you have absolutely no control over, but you have to pay loads of attention to. So it does depend on the type of event you're holding, obviously. But again, having backup plans in place really does help in case the weather does turn. So, for example, if you're doing an outside barbecue, make sure you have a space inside just in case, and a backup activity to keep everybody entertained. Because generally, if you're outside, people are very happy and chilled, whereas if they're then being taken inside, they need something to entertain them. Something else I think is keep a close eye on local weather and take advice by the local people. They know the area better than you, what risks to take or what not to take. For example, if you're going to go up in a cable car, I mean, it could be in Matlock near where I live, or the top of Table Mountain in South Africa, or a hot air balloon in the desert. The weather's going to have a huge impact. So always plan an additional activity and make sure you have time allocated to rearrange. A couple of other things would be wind. That's a really weird one to think about, but if you're doing an outside event, wind can have a huge impact on the quality of the sound and also on the stage. You don't want things flying about if they're not tethered down properly. Other things to think about are the sun. And, we tell our kids, keep hydrated. But if you're planning an outside summer event, have a ridiculous amount of water available and sun cream available as well. That's really important. And then really, other couple of things are supplier access. Make sure if it's really bad torrential rain, that suppliers can get in a different way. And then also bear in mind slips and trips, cover your danger zones and risk assessments accordingly. And then one other point is probably flight delays. Is be aware, obviously the ash cloud had a huge impact. Just make sure that you're allocating enough time, plenty of additional time for people to get to the event in case they've got a flight delay.
So obviously we're not wanting to tempt fate on anyone's event, but what if there is a major incident? What are the key elements to consider if something were to happen during an event?
Yeah, this is probably a tough one to answer, but it's the right thing to do. So it's really important to have a major incident team allocated to your event. They need to understand their responsibilities, and generally it's usually the senior leadership team that have got those responsibilities. You need to ensure you have a first aider on site as part of that team, making sure they have all the emergency numbers at the ready, know where the nearest doctors and hospitals are. And something else that's really important is it's always really important to have someone on the team who knows the local area on site and off site with you. To give you, I've got an example of it. It's a bit of a dark day for me, but I'll talk about it. One particular event stands out for me, and it was in May 2017. We had 800 people attending an event in Manchester, very close to the arena, where a bomb went off and over 1,000 people were injured and 23 were killed, mainly children. I'm sure you all remember it well. My customers were in a building adjacent to the arena, and we immediately went into lockdown as soon as that happened. It was a lockdown situation and no one could vacate the building. We'd done all our research, we'd done risk assessments, but nothing could have prepared us for a bomb to go off in an adjacent building some 200 yards away. And at that point, we had absolutely no idea if there were more bombs to be detonated or what the intended target was. It was looking highly likely we weren't going anywhere fast. However, we had a major incident team on site. They sprang into action and reviewed all risk assessments with police and bomb squads and established the safest course of action was to keep everybody together and remain in the building until they could conclude the area was safe. But we weren't given any timescales. I was actually on the outside, and I'd got direct lines into all the local general managers and sales directors of all the local hotels, and we managed to rally transportation and coordinate pillows, blankets, duvets for the team and food to ensure the comfort if they were to be there all night. We eventually got out in the early hours. I suppose to preempt what Dave might ask me is, what was the learning points from that? And I guess the key element here was keeping calm, do not panic. Everybody looks to you to remain calm, even if you don't feel it on the inside. You always hope the major incident team don't ever need to be involved, but having them there is a comfort. After the event, one of the questions we did ask ourselves was having 800 people from our company in one venue at one time, did the value outweigh the risk? And I think that's something really important for you to consider. It's kind of similar when royalty travel together, for example. You'll never see King Charles or Prince William in the same plane, as they don't all travel together on the same flights, as the risk is too high.
I think it's some great advice there. You know, obviously it's a tragic event, but it could equally be a kind of a weather related incident. It could be something that
Yeah,
majorly impacts, and it's that kind of, I guess it's that springing into action of that incident team, and I guess that's something that our team as Gray Dawes can help during the
absolutely.
planning process. Right.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here for, really, to support you. And that's where we add value.
Yeah. So kind of segueing into a kind of into a different way now, kind of, you know, we all know how important food is at events. You know, how do you ensure you plan for having enough food and catering for kind of all the dietary requirements? Kind of give us some kind of hints and tips there.
Yeah, dietary requirements is a really interesting one. And food is my favourite subject. So very happy to talk about that. I think with 40% of event attendees they're going to move towards having dietary requirements by 2030. We need to move towards a greener eating. A recent survey by Line Venue Portfolio also underlined the growing importance of food at events, with 45% of event feedback based on food and beverage, and the majority of organisers spending between 30 and 40% of their event budget on food. I think we need to change some of the language around dietary requirements. The world is changing, and most people at an event want a different menu. They're no longer the exception. They are very part of the main delegation, and they need to be treated as such. Other tips are things like heavy lunches. They're not helpful when you're at an event, as they create food comas. I'm a classic one for a food coma after a good feed, and real lack of engagement from the audience. Everyone goes like that after lunch. The best things to do are ask the venue to provide more protein-based meals with carbohydrate options, so don't include it all in one meal, and go for lighter lunches than full-on stodge. Another tip, just on, it's not necessarily dietary requirements, but I think it's an important point on food, is be careful with sharing platters for main meals. They are they're very common and very, you know, everyone likes them, but guests can go hungry on a sharing platter. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and we were going to the theatre, and we arranged a show round of the venue before, and we went to the theatre. Bear in mind, we were at the theatre having sort of a pre-theatre meal, and many people have been travelling most of the day to get there, and the food was a sharing platter, which just wasn't sufficient for people to eat. And afterwards, everybody headed to McDonald's. I was, you know, if someone came to my house and went to McDonald's after, I'd be, you know, for a meal, I'd be mortified. So I think the moral of the story is sharing platters are great for starters, but not for a main meal.
I mean, it's an interesting one. So if you kind of had a choice, particularly around, you know, where, you know, I've been to lunches where there's either a buffet or there's kind of, you order and food's brought to you, or, you know, is brought to you. Is there kind of a preference? Because obviously, in terms of kind of everyone getting the right amount of food, you know, should you have a buffet? Should you have kind of, again, everyone has an individual meal brought to their table? Is there kind of any pros and cons around that?
I think for lunch, I think what's really nice is having a buffet, having different stations, so plant-based stations, you know, vegetarian, vegan-based, you know, different based stations around. I think is excellent. I said, because that gives everybody a variety. It gives you the choice of what you want to eat, rather than feeling like you've got to have something, otherwise you're going to be starving. So I think having a choice. And then I think for dinner, it's really nice, you know, for I guess from a service point of view, it's nice to have, you know, your dinner served. It depends on your event, on how casual you want it to be. Do you want people up and networking? It really depends on the event, but that's something we can help with and sort of help you choose.
One of my personal kind of things that I always look for, you know, I don't drink, so I always look for kind of a non-alcoholic, and I don't want to drink Coke or water. Are you seeing a rise in people looking for different, you know, looking for more non-alcoholic options, you know, mocktails, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting is the younger generation that are coming up are very much into clean living. And we are finding that not one size fits all. Not everybody wants to have a glass of wine like me. You know, people do want to just actually have one of the non-alcoholic gin and tonics. They look great, they taste great, and they're non-alcoholic. and actually they like the idea of it, but they want to have that clean living. So yeah, we're getting loads of requests for that. And also what we're finding is you can have an option of for example, you could have an alcoholic brunch. You know, you can have these brunches where it's a bottomless brunch, but you can actually have a non-alcoholic bottomless brunch, which is lovely. So I think there's people are starting to think differently about alcohol versus non-alcohol.
Yeah, brilliant. So we've just had a kind of in the webinar chat a comment from Merle, and again, this is around the sort of things that can happen that you have to be very agile and adapt to. And Merle said, you know, to repatriate a delegate and his family when he passed away while playing tennis at a convention in Spain. You know, they did this by chartering a flight and had to contact the local health services. So again, it's to try and plan and for as much as you can, but unfortunately, these are things that not always as you know as bad as that, but these are certainly things that can happen that you need to, you know, kind of again use us to advise and help during that process. But yeah,
I think do you know what, you know, there will be always something that happens, and I guess it's the way that you deal with it and the way that you support them through it. You know, I had a situation many years ago. I had to deal with something similar, and you know, it's having that support behind you, knowing who to go to, knowing who to have the people around you, sort of have that support network back at the office or on site, and just knowing who to go to is absolutely critical.
So I've got another question here. This is kind of going back to probably a couple of points ago. So
sure.
I think I've got this question right. But you know, say you have a speaker or that doesn't arrive for some other reason, and you maybe don't have a backup speaker. But you know, what would you suggest as a backup to entertain the kind of audience for, you know, or keep them engaged, that doesn't necessarily impact highly on the budget, just to kind of keep the process going and keep the energy high?
Okay, so there's you know, what I'd probably do is just have a backup of maybe 3, and you can just have them as almost icebreakers and team building, sort of little team building events. They cost nothing. So for example, I did something actually with our internal team recently, and they'd got 4 words that were associated with the event, and one of them was energize, funnily enough. And I did an anagram, and I got them all the words printed out on paper. The letters printed out on paper, and everyone held up an A4 letter. There was 7 of them at the front, and they all had to work out what the word was. It did take them a little while to do it, and it was quite entertaining, and they're all shouting and everything, but it was good fun, and it got people engaging. So if you have perhaps 3 or 4 just examples of quick things you can just pull up with, and I've got some, so I can send that out after actually as some additional material.
That'd be great.
It's literally things that would cover 10 minutes, and then you could have another one for 10 minutes. But yeah, I'll send them out, no problem at all.
Brilliant. So we've got one question left, but again, to the audience, if there's anything you want to ask or pose, then kind of put it in the chat and we'll get to that. So, but obviously we're just going to kind of segue to sustainability.
Sure.
You know, sustainability is very much on the agenda for all elements of travel, you know, business travel, you know, meetings and events. You know, it's very much, you know, it's part of the framework that you have to look at now when planning events. What should people consider with regard to sustainability when they're planning an event or a large meeting?
Okay. Well, first of all, it isn't going away, this subject. And I think for a long time, people have, hotels particularly have probably just hoped that it would go away, and it isn't going away. To give you sort of a flavour of some figures, a recent study by Zurich Tourism and Conference and Incentive Travel said 95% of responders told them that the issue of sustainability influenced decision making when it comes to planning and running an event, and 35% described it as crucial. So first of all, I think there's a very obvious one, which is, do you need everybody to get together? Is it crucial? Is it business critical? Can you hold it virtually, or can you hold a hybrid event? Virtual is 0 carbon emissions, and by holding it hybrid, you are reducing your carbon emissions significantly. But that does take away the value from face-to-face events and networking opportunities, which I think after COVID, we're all ready for. So it's difficult. But we've all got a responsibility, I think, to become more sustainable. And it's important to think about many areas. And I think, seriously, the first one is, although basic, do they recycle? Does the venue, does whoever you're going, wherever you're going, do they actually recycle their materials? And that may sound really simple, but I genuinely was horrified when I was at the World Cup at the back end of last year in Qatar, I should say, to see that they don't recycle anything out there. They put the bins out as if they do, but they don't. And so much of the plastic, so much plastic waste is used out there. It was a real eye opener, actually, for me, that. Question, the venues, are they ethically sourcing their ingredients? Are the teas and coffees coming from a responsible provider? Is the venue plastic and paper free? Think about things like your conference badges. Rather than having more conference badges created, the lanyards, you could use the ones from the office if you've got some in the office. They're all generally made out of recyclable plastic anyway, but ask them to bring them and then they can take them away again. And I think probably using technology as well, for example, and having content available online rather than giving everybody a load of packs is becoming more and more prevalent. And I think that is a massive way to become more sustainable. But there are lots of things you can do.
Brilliant. I think that's real good advice there, Casey. So we've got a couple of questions I'm going to ask you, and then we'll summarise and finish up there. So the first question is, what has been your favourite team building event you've witnessed? Did it achieve what it was meant to, or was it purely for entertainment?
What a great. So there's been, to be honest, there's probably two, and one of them is it's going to sound bizarre, is really no cost apart from Lego bricks. So and this is a team building event. So this is where you have two different rooms, two groups of people in two different rooms, and one of them's got a building, or they've both got to create the same building out of Lego blocks. One person's on the phone, one person's blindfolded, and one person blindfolded, one person on the phone, and one person's directing, and then the other people are sort of trying to guide how this goes. That is incredible in terms of watching people back and seeing how they all work together. And I'll be honest, I was the one that was bossing everybody about, but actually it didn't really help anybody. I was taking over as usual. So that's a brilliant, really cost-effective one. I can send out more details. And then from a fun perspective, I had a brilliant one on the Thames. It doesn't all sound flashy, but it was going out on, is it the rib boats that you go out on? And you go out to the estuary. That was brilliant. So that was supposed to be a team building, but that was down on the estuary, and we went flying out there, and it was fantastic. So that was my fun part. But the team building one is that one that doesn't cost, literally the cost of Lego bricks. And it wasn't Lego bricks, it was more the blocks.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Great question.
So we've got two more questions. Next one is, when trying to reserve dates for a venue and you're not in a position to pay a deposit, perhaps a client hasn't paid, any tips on how to approach venues about this? Sorry,
say that again slowly,
so
Dave.
When trying to reserve dates for a venue and you're not necessarily in a position to pay a deposit, any tips of how we should approach, of what venues you should approach about that? How do you broach that conversation with a venue? And how amenable would they be to doing that without a deposit?
I think the deposits have become a lot more prevalent. It never used to be like that years ago. So 10, 15 years ago, you didn't need a deposit to confirm a venue. But because of COVID, and because I think venues are getting more canny and terms and conditions are getting more canny, they are asking for deposits. I get that. I think it's about relationship building, and actually, having a relationship with that venue is critical. I suppose that's probably where an agency comes into play, because we will already have that relationship and we can negotiate on your behalf. If you're going directly to the venue, I think the best course of action would be to speak to the revenue manager and give them some sort of comfort to know that the event is definitely going ahead, and putting perhaps a payment plan in place. Perhaps if you can't pay all the deposit, you can put a percentage down, and that will go certainly towards appeasing them.
Okay, brilliant. And going back to the final question I've got here is, and this is going back to your question regarding, your point earlier about incident teams. So the question is here, I work for a small startup company and we host events for our membership community / partnership clients. They can vary from 30 to 100 attendees. Where shall I start with creating an incident team for events? Are there any helpful resources you could suggest?
An instant, sorry.
Where shall I start with creating an incident team?
Oh, an incident team. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, well, it's my accent. Yeah.
No problem. Sorry. No, I totally get that. There's all sorts of resources that you can go online for. But what I would suggest you do is really, if you're creating a startup, was it a startup company? Did I hear you say?
Yeah, it's a small startup company hosting events for membership between 30 and 100 attendees.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm hoping that you have some form of health and safety officer, or you have some external resource that's there, because wherever you're starting up a startup company, you should have some sort of health and safety executive within your organization. If not, there's certain portals and you could outsource those. They will tell you where to start. There is everywhere really has a critical every business should have a critical business plan, because, for example, if your server was to go down, then you would need to know where the rest of your servers are secured, etc. But there are online material that you can find to support you in various places. So again, I think what the best thing for me to do is send you some links after. So I'll send everybody some links to find how to create a major incident team, because I could go into quite a lot of depth now and I'm conscious of time as well.
Brilliant, lovely. I guess we don't have any more questions, Katie, but I guess to summarize, what are the top 3 learnings or key takeaways for attendees today that you want the audience to remember after this webinar? What are the 3 kind of silver bullets, I guess?
Okay. You can't prepare too much. Prepare. That's got to be the biggest part. Always have a backup plan. Always have something that you've got, that's your backup plan, and be inclusive for everyone, and just make sure that you're taking into account everybody's needs, everybody's skill set when you're organizing one of these events.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, Katie, that's been brilliant. Thanks for that. We've got some great comments around there about your energy. So thanks for bringing that all together.
Thank you.
So we'll be sending around a pack of information. Thanks for everyone attending this our first Gray Dawes Events webinar. There will be more in the future, I'm sure. So, but from myself, Dave Bishop, and you, Katie Whitby, thanks very much for your time, and we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.